Some Google Ads recommendations are very good and I would recommend them, and you would see an improvement in performance, while others are not so good and you potentially could see a dip in performance. So I've got years of experience. I've worked with a number of different campaigns within Google Ads over the years. And in today's video, I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Google Ads recommendations. So let's start off with the good recommendations, and then we'll jump into the not so good recommendations. So the first ad recommendation is adding assets to your ads. So if you've got 3 headlines and a description, then I would look to add more headlines and descriptions. Now, the reason why is it gives Google the opportunity to test different headlines and different descriptions. So the only time that I would probably have 3 headlines and a description is in a highly regulated industry where you can't give Google the access or the ability to rotate different ads, try different variables. We have to kind of pin headlines 1, 2, and 3, but that's the only exception to the rule. So if we're seeing add assets, then I would potentially look to build out my headlines and descriptions. And this allows Google a little bit more freedom to test in different variables. Also, adding in things like site links, call extensions, promotions, anything that can make our ads bigger, more real estate. So say we're searching for our ads, rather than seeing a small campaign where we've got some headlines and descriptions, we're going to have call outs, we're going to have extensions, we're going to have site links. We're going to have a larger real estate for us to see. So people are searching our ads, they're going to have a bigger opportunity. So there's no downside to doing this. By having more headlines, more descriptions, having site links, having call outs, call extensions, promotions, if you're looking to promote, all we're doing is making the ads bigger. So just a little bit of extra work makes a big difference to campaigns that we're searching for, our searches for on Google Ads. So definitely it's something that I would highly recommend. And if we're doing this, the chances are we're going to get a higher click-through rate, which generally leads to more conversions, which is what we're trying to do, whether it be lead generation, service-based, or e-commerce. So add in as many call extensions relevant to your campaigns. And at the end of the day, remember, it's free, but it's just a little bit more work for us. And we're giving us our campaigns a bigger opportunity for people to view them on Google Ads. The second one, the second recommendation that I would include would be including popular keywords in the headlines. So having ad groups based around keyword themes, keeping these tightly knit together. And then from there, what we're trying to do is have several ad groups which are highly relatable of the keyword runs through to the headline. And then from there, what we're trying to do is make everything relatable. So if somebody clicks on, say, an ad group, clicks on a related search, and then they come through to the ad, the language used in the ad is highly relatable right the way through the campaign. So what we're trying to do is make sure that everything that we're doing is related to the ad group keyword theme, and then that follows through to the ad itself. So highly relatable, tight keyword themes. So we don't want ad groups that are just a wide variety of different keywords. We want to keep them tightly knit. And Google likes that. Google will reward that based on, we'll look at the things like the quality score, that type of thing. So that's something that I definitely would recommend. The third thing is fixed disapproved ads or assets. So if you're seeing disapproved headlines, descriptions, or maybe images, then rather than just leaving them, for just replacing them, changing them, maybe you've put, you've capitalized something or put too many exclamation mark, and Google's disapproved that. And whatever the disapproval asset is that Google has recommended to you, then that's something, again, you should be looking to update. And again, it takes a little bit of work, but just going through the assets every week, just making sure that nothing's disapproved, because you're giving yourself the best opportunity to have everything seen. So all your headlines, all of your descriptions, if they're disapproved, just updating those, making them highly relatable. Images disapproved, just swap them out, just change the image. Sometimes Google will say too blurry, headline disapproved. For the sake of 2-3 minutes, it's very easy just to replace that asset that needs to be replaced within Google Ads. And if we do that, then we're going to give ourselves a more highly probable outcome of getting more clicks, more impressions, and then equally that gives us more conversions because more people are seeing our ad. So that's something that I highly recommend. The fourth recommendation that Google can come out with is make your headlines and descriptions more unique. So This is a big one. It's not a massive. It's something that it's small but can make a big difference. So a lot of people, when they start creating ads in Google, they'll look at what the competition are doing and they'll make it very generic. So everyone's ads will look very, very similar. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing. So it's a good thing because sometimes we need to relate to the industry. So we can't reinvent the wheel, but we don't want to copy what everyone else is doing. So what I like to do is say 10, 15%. So some of the headlines, some of the descriptions, we can make them a little bit different to what everyone else is doing. So don't do this for the whole campaign because it still needs to be relatable to what you're doing, whether again, lead generation, service based or e-commerce. But maybe add a little bit of humor. Just try to make the ads a little bit different because if they resonate with the person who's clicking on the ads, then potentially you could have something that's going to get a lot more clicks, impressions, which ultimately is going to lead to more conversions. And then you can do more of that. But like I said, just 10, 15%, a little bit of testing, try things a little bit different, unique. It takes a little bit more work, but remember, we're trying to get more conversions. And the way we can do that is to be a little bit more unique. Otherwise, we just end up copying everyone else. And it's just not the best practice, I don't think. So be a little bit unique. You still need to have certain key elements, headline descriptions in there, but we can also add a little bit of something a little bit different, maybe a little bit of humor, if that's something that we can do within the campaign. So that's the 4 things that I would focus on for recommendations. Now, let's move on to recommendations that potentially aren't as good and things that I would take with a little bit of pinch of salt. So let me run through the several that I definitely would think about before I click in on the Google Ads recommendation. So the first one is optimize your budget. Google often recommends optimizing the budget, which is just increasing the budget. Now, I like to be proactive. Now, remember, when we run Google Ads, we know that before we can increase the budget, whether Google's recommending it or we are looking at our campaigns as Google Ads professionals, we know we need to be making sure that we're getting enough conversions per month. So if we're not getting enough conversions and we're increasing the budget, then you're simply going to magnify the issue. So if you're not converting, then by increasing the budget, you have no chance of getting more conversions. If we're getting conversions and we're increasing the budget, then we know that we can scale. And remember, looking at things like search impression share, we know there's room to scale into. So when Google recommends increasing the budget, we need to make sure we're getting enough conversions. But we should be proactive. We should know that we need to be increasing the budget before Google shows us that. But if they do, then you can do a little bit of research and we can increase the budget. But make sure you're getting conversions is the main thing. And scaling, increasing your ROAS is a good thing. We have to make sure we're getting more conversions. And remember, don't focus on ROAS. So getting a higher ROAS at a lower level is not going to work as well as getting a lower ROAS at a higher level. So just remember, ROAS isn't everything. We need to have a balanced understanding of what ROAS and what the figures are for what we're doing within Google Ads. So that's, again, one of the things that I would definitely look to understand. Now, the next thing is add broad terms. You'll jump on with Google Reps and they'll tell you add more broad terms. You'll jump on with the recommendations. You'll look at the campaign and it will say add more broad terms each and every week. Broad, broad, broad. Broad is fine. The only time that we potentially wouldn't use a broad is if we have a niche within a niche and we need to kind of have more exact terms, then that's the exception to the rule. We don't always have to add broad, but the majority of ads that we run in 2025, which is relevant, we add 1 or 2 broad, and then I kind of build out then from exact. So we've got to understand the structure. Now, broad will only put more money into Google's pocket. And you could potentially, if you've got a campaign that's working and you add a lot of broad, it could potentially tank. Broad has to be controlled through negative keywords. So we have to be careful with broad terms because they're good, but also potentially there's an issue with them. So broad will give you the volume, but you have to add negative keywords, have exclusion lists before you even run campaigns. And broad, like I said, will literally give money to Google. So just be careful with this recommendation. The recommendation is there. And we just need to make sure that, if you've got 10, 15, 20 broad terms in an account, then potentially you're just wasting money and you're just giving money to Google because it's showing for a wide variety of different terms that aren't relevant to your campaign, or there's very little relevancy there. So you're just literally wasting money. So just be careful with adding broad match terms as a recommendation from Google. So we need to make sure we're not getting irrelevant traffic. And if we are, we're controlling it through exclusion lists, which we've done before we even launched the campaign. And then obviously we're looking at the negative keywords on a regular basis. The next thing, removing conflicting negative keywords. Now, this pops up often and it confuses advertisers. We should have an extensive list of negative keywords and exclusion lists, like I've just previously mentioned. Exclusion lists are there before we even launch the campaign to make sure that we're staying as relevant as possible. But removing conflicting negative keywords. Now, we should have an extensive list of negative keywords. We're doing our weekly audits, but sometimes you can have adding negative keywords to the campaigns that you're running, but they're just low quality. They're just not working. They're related to what you're running, as in the campaign that you're running within Google, but they're just performing not very well. So you're adding them in as a negative keyword. So remember, we can add them in as broad, as phrase, and exact. And again, that's very, very relevant for what we're trying to achieve. So if you're adding them in as exact, then you've got to add a lot more. So you may see this pop up. I am very cautious with this. Not very often will I click on this, because Google, as advanced as it is, will give these recommendations, and they're not based on my strategy, what I'm trying to achieve within my Google Ads campaign. So just be careful with adding any of these three as recommendations within Google, because potentially you could see something that's performing well literally tank overnight. So just be understanding of the campaign structure, recommendations that Google's given, and not just also the recommendations, but also jumping on with the calls with the Google Ads reps. They'll follow a script. Very few have actually ran campaigns. And this again goes with Meta the same. Jumping on and they'll recommend certain things like adding more broad. Why wouldn't you add more broad? Well, because it's not relevant. We don't need to add broad. We just need to make sure that we've got the right structure. We're adding in broad. We're adding in exact terms. I don't use phrase anymore. And that's something that I'll explain in another video. But we control all of this through exclusion lists, negative keywords through our weekly audits. And then also we're adding negatives at the account level as well. Again, we can explain this another time. So they're the recommendations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I hope they make sense. If you want me to look at your account and go through the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm always happy to do that. Fill in the form below and we can speak soon. Hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know.